My dog is stealing my entrance. What the hell?
I know. Hi, Kerry. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My dog is obviously happy to be here as well. She's not even in the room, but she's making her presence known.
I know. And what's bad is if my dogs were to hear your dog, it would be a whole other can of worms, right?
Well, you know what? I was, when we first started this whole pandemic situation, and I don't mean to make light of it, but I was very rigorous about trying to make sure that everything was pristine and the kids were away and the dog was away and the husband wasn't going to barge in, and I had a slider lock installed on the top of my, when I say installed, my husband put it in, on the top of my office door so that they couldn't jimmy the lock. But 8 months in, and I'm like, I'll probably brush my teeth and have my hair and makeup done to some degree, but I can't promise, like, there's no sort of etiquette from the rest of my family. It just means what you get.
As long as no one walks behind either one of us, I'm impressed.
No, you know, I mean, but on some days it could be me doing that. That's just how it goes.
So great. Listen, I'm so grateful. I met you through Robin, my original colleague. She introduced me to you. I did your show. We sort of went off and did our lives and such. And then I meet this wonderful woman named Sandy. And she's like, you have to meet this wonderful woman, Kerry. And because I'm flooded with all these amazing people in my life, I'm like, I think maybe, no, I don't think I met her. And then I meet you again. And I'm like, I met you. I was on your show. So it's so great to get reconnected with you. I love your work. I love what you're up to.
Oh, thank you. It was funny because when we first were talking, you know how, listen, everything is virtual right now. You're not meeting anybody in person. And I'm like, damn, I know this name. I feel too stupid to say that I know your name, but and then I started to recognize your background. And I think it was probably like 5 or 10 minutes in. And I was like, did I interview you for blah, 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 blah? And you're like,
yes,
you did.
It's so funny. It's so great.
You know, there's so much. And I don't think the show that I was working on is noise. I love the show that I'm working on, which is Wheelhouse, which is a show and a story about highlighting women who are doing great things and changing the world. But there is a lot of digital noise out there, and it's hard sometimes to remember where you met someone or who introduced you. And anyway, I'm very glad that we have continued our conversation, and I really appreciate you inviting me to talk on your show.
Oh, I'm so grateful. So just for the audience so that they know, so what I'm doing here with my series, Michelle's Conversations That Matter, is I'm highlighting stories that need to be have a light shined on them, largely around mental health and well-being, because I want to be a source to create more compassion, understanding, education, and ultimately reduce the stigma of mental health. So, but I do have other topics on, like today we're going to be talking about rising up from self-esteem, because it's very important and it plays a role in our mental health. So I'm grateful that you said yes to joining me. And so, Kerry, for the audience, could you introduce who you are, where you live, and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Kerry Barrett. I founded and own a business called Kerry Barrett Consulting. It is a young business. I'm about 18 months in now. I live in Northwestern New Jersey. New Jersey is my home state. I grew up overseas, but I did go to high school in New Jersey and tiny bit of middle school as well. I have a 20-year background as a TV news journalist, a producer, a reporter, an anchor, an Emmy-winning anchor, which I hate to toot my own horn, but my marketing team says I should, and the Emmy is in the background. So there you go. Done. You can edit that part out if you want. But I spent 20 years in the TV news industry, and after said 20 years, I decided it was time to do something new. So I launched my own business, like I said, about 18 months ago. And I am a media trainer, a public speaking coach. I help people create their personal and professional brand video stories. And I bring my experience of storytelling using video and sound bites, excuse me, from my news background into what I currently do now. The funny thing is that if you go on my Facebook page or anything where there may be some interaction with people who I know from high school or who have watched me on TV, I would be the last person in the world that anybody I went to school with would have expected to be a public speaking coach, and a TV news anchor. And the reason for that is because I was terrified. I was not only terrified of public speaking, I was terrible at bad. And this goes back to 4th grade. I was the gal in the back of the room who was like hyperventilating, likely in the fetal position, in a puddle of her own vomit. I hated public speaking so much. And part of that had to do with my self-esteem. But I figured out, it wasn't an immediate thing, but I figured out how to transition from that sort of fear-based mentality to okay, I'm scared, but I'm going to try this anyway. And even if I fail, it's not the end of the world. Am I going to die? No. Are my true friends and family going to abandon me? No. And coming out and realizing that I was going to come out on the other side standing, that sort of allowed me to take those leaps of faith.
That's amazing. So your friends would have thought that you were the last person. But let me tell you, from the moment I met you, I was like, this woman would never in a million years have a self-esteem issue. She's poised and well-spoken. And it's funny because I just went for a walk with my 2 friends, Ben and Liz, and we were talking about public speaking as a young person. And I said the same exact thing. I was terrified to public speak. There was no way I was standing in front of a group of people and just like exposing myself and allowing them to look at me as I spoke. Never.
No, never. And I remember high school even, I didn't even want to sneeze. Like if I had a sneeze in class or I had a cough, I would actively like try and suppress it because I didn't even want the noise of the sneeze or the cough to like draw people's eyes to me. That's how much of a wallflower I was. And it did change, but it changed based on external factors. Like I got, like to be blunt, I discovered alcohol at my junior and senior year in high school. And I realized that it gave me a certain sort of bravado that was not real, but it allowed me to break into these sort of circles and areas that I wanted to, but I didn't know how to do authentically. And then that led me down another path that was not real or, real or authentic or necessarily direct me toward my end goal. And it happens automatically. And all of a sudden you change from a wallflower to being sort of this, like, I'm willing to get up on a stage and talk in front of thousands of people. It's a series of steps. What I learned. And when I was originally contemplating moving into the business, which I found myself for 20 years, which is TV news, I thought I need to either like jump all in and have it all figured out from the beginning, or I don't need to do it at all. And what I realized over the course of my education and my internships and my mentorships was that it's just a series of steps. And each step, when you succeed, it builds confidence. And when you don't succeed, but you're able to handle it, it also builds confidence.
Victory.
The failures that you become your victories, because you realize that no matter what happens, no matter what hits the fan, I can recover. And that's where the growth happens. I mean, it sounds trite, but it's true.
No, it's great. It's great. And so this whole idea of self-esteem, I think for me, I have always been riddled with low self-esteem. I think, I guess like as women, we're groomed very young by our parents and our interactions with our parents. And my story, most people know, is my mother was bipolar. So she really wasn't the one who was cheerleading for me and boosting up my self-confidence that I could do things. So I always struggled with it. And, I did, like you just said, like incremental steps, did Toastmasters, and then, was thrown onto the TED stage and was like, oh God, So I think that like with everything that you get through, it leads you to the next thing. Could you expand a little bit more about your story with self-esteem, low self-esteem? I just don't get it because I don't know you as a younger woman. I know you now, and I don't see that. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me.
Well, first of all, thank you. And second of all, hats off to you being able to overcome that. I feel like self-esteem and self-worth can be sort of this high level, like vague, nebulous. It's important to have, but we don't really know why, other than it makes us feel better. And that's true to some degree, but it applies to so much more. So to back up and answer your question as it pertains to my experience, I was always pretty outgoing as a younger kid, and by younger, I mean, like, I was told by my parents that in kindergarten and first grade, I was pretty outgoing. I have zero recollection of that, but that's what I understand. We moved around a lot when I was a kid. And so I didn't have I was always around kids who, they started school together and they graduated high school together. They were from, 3 to 18 and they knew each other. I never had that. I was here for 18 months. I was there for 2 years. I was here for 3 years. I lived overseas. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is because I do think there is some affect that I had from that experience in which I didn't have that support structure. And I didn't have, bullying was, oh my God, how old am I? It was like 40 years ago. It was not the thing that it is today. We didn't understand it. We didn't talk about it in the way that it is. And so I was living in Britain at the time when this all started to spiral for me. And there was a girl who, we went to a private sort of international school, and I can't remember where exactly she was from, Denmark, perhaps. Her name was, we called her Jen. And she took an instant disliking to me, and I had nothing. There was no support structure either with my parents or internally to be able to deal with this. And so I brought all of her hatred and all of her angst and everything else that was directed to me. And it was not a her problem. It became very much a me problem. And so for years, for decades, Jen sat on my shoulder and she dictated every decision I made. She dictated whether I reacted in fear. She dictated how I felt about certain situations. She informed every single decision I made. And it wasn't until I was well into my 30s that I finally got to the point where I was able to say, you know what? I have had success despite you, Jen. And you're never going to leave me. You will, to some degree, always be there. But I can acknowledge you and say, that's great. You're there. I'm glad you've piped up with your 2 cents. Stand down. I'm not letting you dictate the decisions that I make anymore. And that's where everything started to change. And it wasn't immediate. It wasn't like I had an epiphany moment. It's like you take 2 steps forward and 2 steps back, or 3 steps back, but you keep pressing onward. And it's scary as hell. It really is. And that sounds trite. And I know you can swing a dead cat and hit those platitudes on Instagram about taking risk when it's scary, et cetera, et cetera. But it really is true. Yeah. You keep pushing forward and knowing, like, to follow that logical conclusion. Oh, this is really scary. What if everybody makes fun of me? Okay. Then what? Yeah. Are you going to die? Are you like, kids going to hate you? Or is your spouse going to hate you because some idiot out on, Twitter land has decided to make fun of you? No, you're not. So then what? Well, then I'll feel really bad about myself. Yeah. Okay. So then what? Like, when you follow that logic out to its, sort of conclusion, like, at the end of the day, you're still going to be standing and you're still going to have, whether it's one person or your dog or
Yeah.
cat, you're still going to have people around you or things around you that support you. And that's really what it comes down to.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, I think about the internal dialogue that we have going on in our heads around our own self-esteem. Like that's what sort of comes to mind. And I think about like my mom, you know, she was mentally ill, and I always, like, now I can separate the fact that, you know, she was who she was and she had a mental illness, but like the things that she would say to me was just like, you know, like, who do you think you are? You know, blah, 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 blah. And I realized that some of those internal things that our parents may have said to us as a young person still run amok in our minds. And so I had started my own company. My company is Trifecta Mental Health, and I was struggling in the very, very beginning. And I remember having this desire to have it be successful, but I had this dialogue, who the hell do you think you are, running the show? And I was like, this is not helpful. Like,
did you ever find an answer to that question? Like, who the hell do you think you are? Like, I haven't, but like, I would love to know if you did, because that would help me.
It's just hysterical to me that, like, you know, and I'm sure you have that sometimes with Jen, the internal dialogue where you're like, okay, sit down. Thank you for sharing, but nah, I'm still going to move forward and do me.
Peace out, lady. Yeah. Move on your merry way. I do still, for the longest time, she really did inform how I entered a room. She informed how I immediately thought that people would perceive me. And it wasn't 3 years of therapy until I put those pieces together and I realized what that was creating that drama and that anxiety. And I was able to say, okay, Jen, I now want to be a TV news anchor. This is the last thing that anybody would have ever expected me to do. And that includes me. So what does that mean? Well, if I put myself out there and I want to do this, I want to tell stories and I want to use video to do it, and part of that video involves my face telling people what it is, I must take these steps in order to overcome it. And I will tell you, it is in the actual doing. I mean, I can't, if I've read 2,000 self-help books on self-esteem, and some of them are great, some of them not so much, they helped guide me. But the truth is, it's like actually taking the step. You must do it. And figuring out what success felt like. And conversely, perhaps even more importantly, that I sort of alluded to a couple of minutes ago, is realizing that when the poop hits the fan and I still come out on the other side of that show standing, newscast, and I still get a paycheck, that is success to some degree. And I had to realize that, figuring out that when the poop hit the fan and I could, by the way, I'm using poop just for you, Michelle, because that's not the word I would normally use. I'm keeping it PG. But it's realizing that you can overcome those mistakes and errors and those gaffes, if you will, and still be successful. That's where the real confidence comes from. And not from being perfect, because perfect doesn't happen. It will never happen. It's a futile mission. But it's realizing that when you make a terrible error, and trust me, after 6 hours of live TV for 20 years a day, there's plenty, and all you have to do is YouTube them. You can see all or a lot of my mistakes. Realizing that you can still end up on the flip side of those errors successful and having learned something, that's where the confidence grows. And so in order to have that experience, you have to take the step. It sounds trite again, but it is 100% the key to overcoming.
Got it. And, you know, I also think, like, you know, like you said, you read a whole ton of books on self-esteem, but it's also, you know, when I talk to my girlfriends, you know, your girlfriends all have their opinions, but like most of them are like, it's all about self-love. You got to love yourself. And I'm like, okay, I think that's great. I'm not going to diminish the advice, because it really is important. If you have more self-love, then you're less rattled by the insecurities, you know, and the lack of self-esteem. And so like, do you have anything you do to like sort of just manage the insecurities, or is it just with every recording that you do, you just feel like, you know what, I'm all right?
It's really, I wish I had some epiphany, but it's really just that consistent putting yourself out there. It's more the latter. Like with every recording, you sort of realize you're going to be okay. And for me, being on air opens, I'm not Sean Hannity, nor am I Savannah Guthrie, but nonetheless, being on air opens you up to random critiques and attacks online. And there's a lot of Twitter trolls out there. And when that first was a thing, because Twitter sort of came onto the scene as I was mid-career, it was devastating. I mean, people would horrible things. Are you wearing glasses so that you can try and look smart because you're really an idiot? Or that red lipstick makes you look like a whore, or you look fat. Are you, this is not what we need to me. This is procedure for, and it was devastating for about 3 days. And then I realized, this person has an egghead for their avatar. Like, I don't know why I give a hoot what the hell he or she is. I don't even know what their name is. It's initials followed by a bunch of numbers afterwards. Like, and it was sort of that realization that I can take critique, and it actually didn't really affect my day to day. Awesome. It was just that, when you sort of acclimate, it's like that. This is not a good analogy, but I was going to use the one about the frog who's in the pot and the water like is slowly jumping up, and it's suddenly right. If you put them in a pot of boiling water, they jump out. But if you increase the temperature as they're in there, they don't notice it. Yeah. Kind of like that, but that's not a good analogy. But eventually you acclimate to it is what I'm getting at. So you realize that, oh shit. Oh poop. That happened to me. And look at that. Yeah. 5 days later, I'm still standing, and the people who care about me still care about me. Wow. And that in and of itself is a learning opportunity, because you realize, holy cow, man, I'm still okay. And all is well. And that is huge. Yeah. You can't get there unless you do. It's that whole, like the doing is in the learning is in the doing, and the, paralysis by analysis. And there's a million quotes that I could give you, but it really is like trying to put yourself out there in a tiny way. And so for clients that I have that I work with, who are scared of public speaking, it may be as simple as this. You're on a virtual Board of Education meeting for your kid's school district. Speak up in the chat. Even if you don't feel like you have something that's entirely relevant to say, write something anyway. Yeah. Even if it's like, I really love what you're doing. Great job. Yeah. Whatever. Tiny bites. That's what it comes down to. And if it is, you're in you're in your church and somebody in your Bible study asks a question, like, speak up. It doesn't have to be this big 60-minute soliloquy, but allow yourself those sort of 30-second moments where you can expand your horizons a little bit, and you're in a relatively safe space, and then you build on that.
I think it's really important to remind people that their voice matters, that what they have to say matters. Because like, I know for me, when I was struggling with self-esteem, I didn't feel like anything I had to say was significant and could make a difference. I think my biggest epiphany was when I stepped on the TED stage and people came up to me afterwards, and I was like, oh my gosh, like maybe I do have something to say, and maybe my voice matters. Like before that, I was the girl who was in the boardroom with, 5, 6 other people, mostly men, and had brilliant ideas, but would never vocalize them until after the meeting was over. And my boss would be like, well, why didn't you speak up? And I was terrified too. Yeah. So I think it all does go back to reminding people that you have a beautiful voice and you have something to contribute, and you should never let anybody or anything stop you from vocalizing that.
I have never, ever in my 20 years as a journalist come across anyone who has nothing to offer.
True.
Ever.
Yeah.
Ever. I don't care if there's somebody who's sitting on the street corner who has, you know, a history of drug addiction, and there is, or a janitor in a hotel or a school or a high level CEO. And the truth is, it's often the other guys, the quote unquote little guys, who have those really compelling stories. But in 20 years and in thousands of people, we've never met anybody who doesn't have something to share that we can all learn from, ever.
Exactly. There was, I did a leadership course with Landmark called the Introduction Leaders Program. And I remember in that course, they had us do mirror work. Have you heard of this mirror work where you look in the mirror and you sort of like connect with your eyes, and it's just like an exercise that you do around self-love?
I have a friend who does the Superwoman pose every morning. So like when she's feeling bad, she gets in front of the mirror and she stands like this. I forget how long she does it for. It's like a minute or two, but she sort of like has this very intentional, like, I'm going to go kick today's ass, and here's how I'm going to start. Is that the same thing?
I think it's the same. It's similar. I think the whole idea of self-love is the mirror work, where you're looking into your eyes and you're like just really, really clear that you love yourself and you know the value you bring. But I love the power pose. I think Robin, the woman that first introduced us, I think she's one of those big advocates for like just standing there and just really being in your power, especially as women. I think it's very easy to be intimidated by, other men in the business world. So I love the power pose bit.
I love the power pose too. And I absolutely love Robin. It's interesting because so my daughter, who is my oldest child, I have 3, she's 9, almost 10. And we have these really, I try and be very intentional with her and with my boys too, obviously, but she's older. And so the concepts are a little bit more advanced and we can have deeper discussions. But I have a very intentional conversation with her about what it means to be a girl and what it means to sort of live in your own power, and how, so I'll tell you a story. We go to I don't want to use the name because I don't want to incriminate them, but it's not an incrimination, but so we go to a discount store. It's a big store, right? There's food, there's toiletries, there's home decor, there's the whole shebang. And there's like 5 rows of beauty stuff that basically is all telling girls and women that they're not okay, that the way they are. Your lashes should be longer, and your nails should be shinier, and your lips should be fuller, and your hair shouldn't be that color, and you should, all of that stuff. And I find it so, it's tough for me to bring her in there as a 9-year-old, because I feel compelled to have discussions with her that my parents didn't have with me about, like, it doesn't matter what all of this stuff is telling you. You don't need to do any of that. And yet at the same time, look at me. I color my hair. I wear makeup. I do my nails. I don't talk about weight, but I work out, and it's a really hard thing to balance. And again, it's one of those platitudes. It's like, oh, let's talk about health and let's talk about this. But I know that my daughter, who's this big around and has a 6-pack stomach because she's very active, is still worried about being fat. And I don't talk about fat with her. How do you get over that? And I know that at 9 years old, this is just the tip of the iceberg. When she hits 7th grade, when she hits 8th grade, and probably the same for my boys as well, it's a whole different conversation. And we're ingrained as a society, and this is not specific to North America. This is across the globe in different iterations, but we are ingrained that as women, our main, our main offering is that we look pretty, and we like it. It was only until a short while ago that I realized aging wasn't a character flaw. Hello. I'm not a dumb person. I have a master's degree. No, it wasn't until like 2 years ago that I realized like getting older was not a character flaw.
I know. You got to embrace that. I definitely can appreciate that. You give a lot of really great tips and information. I actually just recently on LinkedIn, I shared your video. When I started my series, I remember I did remember that you and I had met, but then I also remembered seeing your video about how do we show up on camera? How do we, you know, in this video world that we're in, how do we look our best and what do we wear and everything? And I just shared that video on LinkedIn. And a lot of people commented because they didn't know that like certain colors would be good and like how to fit and the light and everything. Do you have any tips or advice that you would like to share with people as we live in this video world?
Oh my gosh, everybody that is in business right now, whether for themselves or someone else, has most anyway, have an on-camera career to some degree, whether they had explicitly decided that's what they wanted to do or not. And so a couple of quick tips when it comes to presenting on camera. The thing you have to be aware of is that the camera eats energy for lunch. So by that, I mean, what seems like a normal degree of enthusiasm or passion or excitement about a project, the way that you would talk about that across the table from somebody in a room is quite different than the way that you would speak about that on camera. And so you really, no matter how it's performative, I don't mean inauthentic, but I do mean there is some performance that goes along with being on camera in order to make yourself interesting and compelling, which are the two key sort of components of bringing eyes to you on camera and making sure that they stay there. Which if you're a personal brand or business brand is important. The second thing that I would advise people about is lighting. And we have all seen those people that are like, and I say this all the time, they're one digitized voice away from the witness protection program. And that's because with the brightest light source in the room behind them. And and when I was working in the news business, when we were doing an interview with somebody that wanted to remain anonymous, that's how we shot them. With the brightest light source in the room behind them, and they were shot in silhouette. And you know, done. Don't do that. The component of video is that you allow the person on the other side of the camera to look into your eyes, and if you could create that sort of rapport or chemistry on the phone or via email, we would, but you can't.
Yeah.
And there are challenges certainly and obstacles to overcome when it comes to video presentation, but you gotta show up and you gotta be present, because if you're not, you're going to be lost in a sea of noise with people who are good on camera. And so that lighting allows the person on the other side of that camera, wherever they may be, to see your face and to see your eyes. And it may sound strictly about aesthetics, but allowing that person to really take in your nonverbals and your enthusiasm and your passion about a project is it gives them an additional opportunity to receive the message in the way that you want them to receive it. I mean, everything about communication is making sure that the receiver gets the message. It's not about you, it's about your receiver. And so making sure that your delivery is optimized for that is of the utmost importance. People assume that if you don't know what you're doing on camera, you probably don't know what you're doing in business as well. And when it comes to interviews, super quickly, because I think this is important, there's a large number of people who are unemployed right now. It's not just about the interview. It's not just about presenting yourself on camera well. It is your employer, potential employer, is also looking at you as to how you are going to present yourself to a potential customer. So it's not just about that immediate connection, but it's how do you represent the brand beyond the interview. So making sure that all of that stuff is where it needs to be is key. That said, I'm violating one of my own rules, which is never wear black and never wear white. I say that as sort of a blanket rule because I don't know who's watching and I don't know the limitations of your lighting and your room. And I know that if you have a bad lighting situation, black or white will exacerbate it. I'm wearing black because I have been here for a year and a half and I know what my lighting situation is and I know what I can pull off and what I can't. If you're unsure, avoid the black and white.
Yeah, your lighting is amazing. You make me look dark. I'm like looking at
you look beautiful.
like, I thought I had good lighting. And then I look at you, I'm like,
I gotta tell you, like the ring lights that you can buy on Amazon now for like $40 are ridiculous. I mean, it's well worth the investment because you up level. You know, it takes everything to a new level. That said, I have good lighting in this room, and I realize for your viewers, the video is intimidating for a lot of us, and we want to hide in a bag, and like we would prefer nobody to see our face. And I'd be glad to do a witness protection program when it came to video, but truly good lighting will erase a whole host of flaws. All the stuff that you think that get good lighting or that lighting bright on your face will exacerbate, it doesn't. I mean, there's a reason that models and magazines talk about lighting. I'm not comparing myself to a model, but good lighting, full, diffuse, daylight temperature lighting will, listen, I have got like a total of at least 15 zits on my face. And one of them. It's good lighting it really does do wonders.
That's good to know. Oh my gosh. So that's a really good message. And you're right. You have to be powerful on camera if you are trying to make an impact or make a good impression. So I think it's really important. I mean, if you can do that powerfully through a video interview with a potential employer, it seems to me you might have the edge.
Huge, because so many people don't know what they're doing, and it's the ones that do that make it to the top, not only in the interview process, but also beyond that when it comes to interacting with their teammates and their prospects, etc. It sets them apart.
And the energy thing, I think, is a great tip. You have to bring your energy. You have to, as much as it feels weird on camera, you have to do that. It's
a whole different environment. And like I said, when I said the camera eats energy for lunch, the camera really does eat energy for lunch. And I learned that only through my time in TV news, you know, with professional lighting and professional audio and the whole studio setup. And I have everything working for me. And I would go back and I would look at the recording, the air check of the show. And I would look at some stories that I read, and I would think at the time, wow, you know, Kerry, you really nailed that one. You connected with every word that was on the script, and you really delivered, and you were so enthusiastic. And then I would go back and I would watch it, and I would see that, you really looked like you were kind of semi-asleep or like sedated. The difference between what it feels like to be energetic and what it actually looks like on camera are two very, very different things. And so I always advise people, clients, etc., go in, open up a, whatever it is you use. I use Zoom. I open up a Zoom recording, and I talk for 30 or 60 seconds. I introduce myself. Maybe I put a pitch out there or whatever. And then I record it. And then I go back and I look and I see and I watch and study what is the actual energy that I'm delivering with versus what it felt like. And you will 9 times out of 10 find that there is an incongruence between what you came across as and what you felt like. And the key is, listen, we all know non-verbal punches up and verbal punches down. So if you're saying, I'm really excited to be here, I can't wait to talk to you about my product, which one are you going to buy? You're going to buy my words. You're going to buy the way that I look, and you're going to buy the way that I look. So you got to make sure that the two come together.
Such priceless information. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
And, I've done that. I actually have watched some of the interviews that I've done on the series, and I'm like, oh, I don't look so swell. I'm not really energized in these. I have to be mindful of this. It's important.
It is tough, and you have to just sort of get comfortable with the feeling of being uncomfortable. You really do have to feel like you are over the top in order to kind of seem.
I know.
It's a tricky thing. We'll get there, though. You're fabulous. Not you. I just mean like you, Nebula, watching. You, Michelle, are spot on.
Oh, I'm so flattered coming from you. So, hey, Kerry, tell us what you're up to. Tell us what's next for you. How do people get in touch with you? We have your website scrolling.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, you can always find me on kerrybarrettconsulting.com. You can email me, Kerry@kerrybarrettconsulting.com. You can call me at 215-779-3705. I have a couple of things going on, a couple of new projects that I'm working on launching, and you can learn more about them on any of my social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is a series of digital courses that have to do with interviewing in the virtual world. I've worked with executive coaches and recruiters and sales coaches to create a program that focuses on delivery on camera, but also on the creation of stories and how you can highlight the you behind the resume when you're doing an on-camera interview. And that applies not just for job seekers, but also for college graduates who are entering a really dicey workforce, and high school students who are interviewing for college virtually, which is a whole new thing. I also am working on a course for small business owners that is related to turbocharging your DIY marketing video. And so it's going to be a course that covers not only gear and tech and editing and lighting and structure and SEO and strategy, but also presentation and messaging and your sound bites. And so I'm really excited about that. That should be launching in January. And then the last thing that I found that I sort of stumbled across is a service offering for mostly small to medium-sized businesses and people that have personal brands and are unsure of how to create video content. And what I am helping them with is creating these 30-minute, really concise, beautifully edited Q&A sort of interview settings. And so as a media coach, I guide you through your answers. I make sure that everything is precise and crisp and clean, and that you're highlighting the right emotions and that you're highlighting the right offerings and the right stories for this audience. And then from that 30-minute, really nicely edited video, you can post it all on YouTube, or also take out of it 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. And if you use it efficiently, you've got a good 2 to 3 months of content out of that interview that you can use for social, for your newsletter, for your blog, for whatever the case may be. And that I'm super excited about. I love drawing out stories from people, and oftentimes they don't know their own story, and I love seeing them find it.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. I love your work. I love your energy. Love everything that you're up to. And thank you so much for being here on Michelle's Conversations That Matter.
Thank you. This was an absolute delight. I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of it. And I can't wait to have more conversations with you.
Yes. Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Kerry. And thank you for everyone who joined us today.
See you later.
Bye-bye.